Good morning again. Notice anything new in the sanctuary besides me? I'm not new. We have this beautiful teaching symbol that Marilyn was talking earlier about the endowment committee and the endowment fund providing projects for the center, and this was one from last year that finally we got installed last Friday, and so and I'll talk about the symbology of it for a moment, but our artist is actually in the house, and so Mike, do you want to stand up for a moment, please? Yeah, come on. So, yeah. And so I understand the outer ring is fairly new wood that's going to age into the patina of pretty close to the beam color. The inside is redwood that's about 125 years old. And he tells me he did not go out and saw down any trees to make this. It was found wood. So, and I was thinking about that. Damien pointed out that age is about the time that Ernest Holmes was just getting started with his teaching 125 years ago. So that tree was growing around the time or just starting up around the time that Ernest was getting started. So I think there's a little interesting tie-in with that. And those who are not familiar with the teaching symbol, the whole thing is enclosed in a circle, which stands for infinity. So everything within it is included within the infinite, the one. And then it's divided into three categories. And the top category is considered what's the ideal, if you will, what we would call maybe God qualities, the highest and best that we can think of. And then it moves down as the V moves it moves into form, because that is what God does. That's what the infinite presence does, is it takes its ideas and moves them into form, just like we do, right? We have an idea and we move it into form. This project began as an idea in our minds and got moved into form. So the middle layer is what Ernest calls the subjective mind, which is the creation process that comes out of our own subconscious, that comes out of the collective subconscious, and that comes out of what you might call the subconscious, if you will, of the universe. I like to think of that as kind of a big dumb giant that can do absolutely anything, and will do absolutely anything that we point it out to do. So if we say, make it good, it will say, yeah, I can do that. If we say make it bad, it'll say, yeah, I can do that. And it doesn't distinguish, it doesn't care. So whatever we do have going on in our subjective mind is what shows up, and then the bottom layer is what's called form. So this is where it shows up in our lives in human form. So we start, for instance, with the idea of a chair. We start with the ideal of comfort and ease, and then it moves into the idea, it gets specified into a chair, and it shows up into form as a chair. So, and the V is the process through which that is the creative process at work, and that process is constantly at work in, through, and as you and I all the time right now. And so that's the teaching symbol in a nutshell. And I know that next week and for 2 weeks after that, Reverend Mary is going to be doing the Quick Start class. And there's a beautiful breakdown of the Quick Start class of a 14-step process that really elucidates that symbol. And so if you've never taken that class, even if you've been around for a long time, it's a great process. It's one of my favorite things that's out of the Quick Start class, is just that 14-step process of looking at that. So I want to thank Mike and the endowment committee for creating that. I was certainly hoping it was going to show up before I left, and so I know Mike had a whole lot of other projects in front of him before he could get to this, and was waiting for the right woods and all that stuff. So thank you very much for bringing it here. Life has changed, isn't it? We're going to talk today about the joy of living. That's our regular talk title. And I was reminded of an old Jefferson Airplane lyric from the Crown of Creation song. It says, "Life is change, how it differs from the rocks." Okay? Light. There is light. And so this process of living, being alive, is change. Every cell of our body changes within a year, right? You know that, right? Yeah. Everything changes. And so we go through, as a community, change constantly. A year ago, we were going through change. Next week, we will go through change. A year from now, we will go through change, because that is just life. Some of the changes are more subtle, some of them seem a little bit larger. And of course, in God, there's no big or small, there's just the process unfolding. There's just this creative process unfolding. And so we're in the midst of that right now. But joy underlies everything, all of it, because joy is the nature and the quality of God. I remember years ago, I was having one of my many breakups of a relationship. I've done that a lot. And so if you want to know how to break up relationships, I'm an expert in that. And so I'm waiting to figure out how to master staying in relationships, but that's down the road somewhere. But I was feeling really sad about this particular breakup, and yet this one time when I was in that sadness, I became aware that underneath that was this joy, this soul joy that was actually enjoying just the feeling of the relationship, the breakup of the relationship, the whole range of emotions, all of it. All of it. The fact that I could have this dance, we can have this dance called life. Many of us will get to the point where one day we'll sit there and go, God, if I could have just one more day of life, I would take it. And so this joy underlies everything. So I want to look at the process of why joy is so prevalent and what it is. And I'm going to turn to one of my favorite philosophers, authors who inspired Ernest Holmes, Thomas Troward. And he talks about the nature of spirit and the substantive properties, the what it is. And so I want to explore those properties. And he says the first property of spirit is life. Life. See, you and I wouldn't be here if there wasn't life, right? Yes? Okay. Life is the very first quality of spirit. You can't have anything else happening until there is life. And so we are here involved in life. And then out of life comes love. Out of life comes love. And he says that as the principle of undifferentiated life, it, spirit, the infinite presence, cannot do otherwise than tend to the fuller development of life in each individual. I love that. To tend to the fuller development of life in each individual. We have flowers, we have plants that we tend to, right? I have some in my front, in front of the, I have a little basket hanging over my front porch right now, and there's some plants in there that I haven't tended to their life. And you know what? They don't have any life anymore. Somebody else revive him. He says, this cannot do otherwise than tend to the fuller development of life in each individual, and the pure motive of giving greater enjoyment of life is love. So the motivation of spirit is to give a greater enjoyment of life. You and I are here to enjoy life. Spirit is here as you and me to enjoy life. Isn't that great news? Okay. How many of you are enjoying life? Yes. And then he says, because it is life guided by love, it is light. And this is the third quality of God. And that by light, he means this all-inclusive perception of the boundless manifestations yet to come. So spirit knows not only what is, but it was what it is unfolding and can see this vision that is greater than our vision. Once in a while I get stuck in many times a day, I get stuck in just how far I can see. But spirit has a bigger picture. And can I rise up, can I go back up to that top level and catch the vision of spirit? Because spirit is looking at something far, far, far bigger than we with our finite existence can see. And then from this light, from this perception, from this idea proceeds power. Proceeds power. Because at the level of spirit, there is no opposing force. There is nothing to oppose this expression of life. Now, this is not power over somebody or something. This is the ability to get things done. That definition of power. Okay? And so there's no opposing force. He says, thus life urged forward by love, which is recognition. So when I love something or someone, I recognize them. If I love you, I recognize you. If you love me, you recognize me. We take each other in, right? And so, if you're in a relationship, you know that the relationship works better when the two of you take time to recognize each other. And I can vouch, because like I said, I'm an expert on, ending relationships, that when you don't tend to your garden of loving, that doesn't work out so well. So life is urged forward by love or recognition, and light or perception of infinite possibility, and it must express, and that's the power of God. And out of that power then comes peace, because there is no antagonism within itself. There's no antagonism within spirit. There's nothing stopping this expression of spirit. There's nothing against spirit. And the truth of the matter is, there's nothing within us because we are embodiments of the nature of spirit that is antagonistic. Out of that process then comes beauty. Out of this expression of power and peace and love and light and life comes beauty, because beauty is the proportion, everything in perfect proportion, and spirit proportions itself equally among all of life. So there's not more of God in some person and less of God in another person. There's all of us are, as Emerson says, inlets to the divine. All of us are inlets to the divine. And finally, out of that process, out of that beauty comes joy. Joy finds pleasure in its self-expression. Spirit finds pleasure in its self-expression. In the contemplation of the limitless creative process, each step, however excellent, is a stepping stone to something even more excellent. Isn't that cool? You know, there's a phrase in the Bible that says we move from glory to greater glory. We move from glory to greater glory. We're in the process of that as a community right now. Okay? We're moving from glory to greater glory. But we're in the process of that, each of us individually, as we open to that, because it's the nature of God to express even more and more and more of itself. It's always a stepping stone for something even more excellent. And so thus the fulfillment of the expression of life is joy. So life, the very first principle, is fulfilled in joy. The result of life is joy. You and I are here to be in joy. Yes? Yes. Yes. Breathe that in for a moment. Breathe that in for a moment. Yeah. So how do we experience more joy? Have you ever, like me, had a moment where you're not experiencing the fullness of joy? Okay. So it's present. It's not. There's nothing wrong with joy. It's fully present, right? And so it must be up to us to open up to it. So let's walk back through that process of Troward and see how it applies in our lives. So the first is to choose life. To choose life. Now, that sounds basic, but many of us actually don't on a subconscious level. I used to be a certified rebirther. In the rebirthing community, they talked about something called the death urge. And that most of us have what is called the death urge. And so you hear it when people talk about, I want to get off the planet. I don't want to stay here in my human existence. I want to go to heaven. I want to arise into spiritual glory. I want to get off the wheel of Dharma. I want to be somewhere, anywhere else than here. Okay? And so that is, I want to die. You know, if you give people the choice, you could be immortal in your body as it is, as this body that you're carrying right now. Most people say, yeah, but I don't want to. And so what does that say about my experience of life? I'm not fully present with it, and I don't like it. I want to do something else. I remember when I was 15 years old, I wanted to kill myself, not because I was depressed, but because I wanted to go be with God and Jesus. I was just in love with Jesus at that time. I was a good Catholic boy. Yeah? But of course, it was a mortal sin, so I knew that if I did that, I wouldn't actually end up there, or in my mind. So I did. But we have this belief that says this life, this body, this place isn't as good as somewhere else. And so we are not fully present here. We're not fully present here. So take a breath with me. So we choose life. We sometimes choose stagnation. We get to a certain point, we say, that's good enough. I'm comfortable. The life we just decided was change. Life is ever growing, ever expanding. And if I get to a point and say, this is enough, right here, I'm stopping, we're no longer choosing life. We're choosing stagnation. We're choosing comfort. One of my early teachers used to say, comfort kills. Comfort kills. Because it doesn't allow us to continue to grow. And so the first step to create greater joy in our lives is to wake up in the morning and say, I choose life today. Remember how you were when you were a kid? Many of you were. Where you woke up in the morning and it's like, oh yeah, it's another it's a great day. I can go play. Or it's Christmas morning, right? You know? What's that? It's Sunday morning, whatever. Whatever reason I had a friend who was a minister saying, she was up before her alarm went off today because it was Sunday and she gets to go hang out with her peeps and talk and be all that, It's like, can we have that every day? Do we have that every day? Do I wake up in the morning, because this is one of my habits I've taken for a long time, is I wake up in the morning and I say, I choose life. And I breathe that in and breathe that in and breathe that in. I notice where in my body I experience resistance until I clear some of that out. I choose life. I choose life, and I choose it constantly. And then once we've chosen life, then choose love. Choose to be more loving. Choose to tend to developing more life in each person you meet. This is the nature of spirit, is to tend to developing more life. And so if I'm going to enact the nature of spirit, if I'm going to experience more joy, I have to be like spirit. How about if I could develop more life in each person that I meet with the pure intention of just giving greater enjoyment of life or spirit? I don't have a personal agenda. I don't have a stake in it, but it's just I'm here to develop, to support that person in having more joy, more life, more aliveness in spirit, just out of love. And so to see how that would play with your life. And as we practice that, as we open up to being an expression of love, then we start to be the light. Be the light. And that's seeing greater possibilities than the appearances. You know, sometimes we get stuck in appearances. You know, when I lived in Seattle, which I'm going to do again, or close to it, the Puget Sound area sometimes gets blanketed under cloud cover. But if you go east about a half an hour up into the Cascade Mountains, you rise above that cloud cover, and there's a beautiful sunny day happening. And I've gone and done that and gone hiking for the day and come back and drove back to Seattle, and as soon as I get over this one particular hill coming into a town called Issaquah, you know, it's the cloud cover starts right back up again, and I recognize that there's millions of people have been sitting under that cloud cover all day long thinking that's all there is. And that's kind of how our life is. Can I climb up out of it? Can I touch the life within myself? It is that top level in the teaching symbol that is that higher level that sees greater possibility. Do I take time consciously each day to do that? To be that light, to touch that light, to allow that life energy that is infused with love and inspired by greater vision to come through me. Whenever I get stuck, if I'm conscious, I remember to go to God, to go to Spirit, to go to that higher vision that knows a greater solution than what I can ever think of. And so that's the third step, is to be the light. As we do this, as we're now expressing and allowing this life, this love, and this light to express through us, we feel empowered. We get in touch with our power. I remember years ago, Reverend Kathy Ann up in Seattle was doing a women's retreat, and she said the most challenging word for that particular group of women was power. When she said, step into your power, they all kind of went, ooh. Okay? Because we have this association with power. You know, we have all these things, you know, power corrupts and ultimate power corrupts ultimately and all that stuff. But this is, again, not power over somebody or something. This is the power to embody and enact spirit and the nature of God. Am I in touch with my power? Do I sit here and say and recognize I'm God-informed? I have the same ability as God to say, let there be, and there is. You know, this is one of the greatest tools we have in religious science, is that spiritual mind treatment that says God is all there is. I am one with that. Therefore, this is going to happen. This is the way it's going to be. This truth of the nature of God is going to be enacted. Excuse me. Including a clear throat. And so it is. When we're in alignment with Spirit, nothing is against us. When I'm in alignment with my highest self, when I'm not trying to do my ego job, but when I'm trying to be doing what Spirit wants to do through me, and listen and be aware in that heart space of what is it that Spirit wants to express through me, there is nothing against me. Nothing stands in the way of that, because there's God and there's only God, and I'm trying to be God-informed. And as we do this, then, we begin to start to feel the peace of Spirit, because when I'm in alignment with Spirit, I'm in peace, right? I'm in alignment with Spirit. I'm centered and I'm at peace. And then out of that naturally flows beauty. I begin manifesting beauty all around me. And beauty doesn't necessarily mean works of art, but it means this balanced, lovely energy that creates in its loveliness, in its beauty. And so I begin to allow that to manifest. And out of this, I experience joy. And so as I open to these qualities of God, I allow them to ripple through me, to trickle through me. I allow myself to be manifestations of them, and I automatically experience more and more joy. More life, more love, more light, more power, peace, beauty, and finally, joy. And it's the outpicturing. And that is our purpose. That's really our purpose here on earth. It's not anything else. Can I be in alignment? Freud reminds us that spirit creates through self-contemplation. It contemplates that which it wants to become. And we contemplate that which we want to become because we enact that creative process. So the question then is, what are we contemplating? My friend Andy Anderson says, I'm always thinking, you're always thinking, but do we really think what we're thinking about? Okay? What is it that I'm contemplating? Am I contemplating joy? Am I contemplating life? Am I contemplating love? Or am I contemplating hurt? Am I contemplating anger? Am I contemplating stuff that is not what I want to enact more of in my life? Because whatever I'm contemplating, that's that second level on the teaching symbol up there, is what I will manifest into form. Even if I say I want more love, but I'm contemplating all the times that love has failed me, guess what I'm going to manifest? More failed love. Because that's what I'm contemplating. Do I contemplate love? Do I contemplate life? Do I contemplate joy? Do I contemplate beauty? We live in a culture that doesn't encourage us to contemplate all this stuff, right? Have you noticed lately, in the last several hundred years, but if you've been paying attention to the news at all, if you turn on the TV, the contemplations aren't on love, are they? No. They're on fighting and anger and all that stuff. What do I contemplate? See, we have a Western culture that believes in suffering, has for a lot of years, for a lot of centuries. Jesus on the cross is the model for a whole lot of people. And even if you didn't grow up in that religion, you live in a country that has been influenced, so deeply influenced by that religion, that suffering is part of our consciousness, part of our subjective mind. And it says that suffering is good. No pain, no gain. If you don't work hard for it and suffer, it's worthless. I love bicycle racing. It's one of my favorite sports to watch, and I love the European commentators sit there and go, well, if that person can suffer more than anybody else, and that's why they win. It's just like, no, they win because they have better physiology, better training, and they're willing to go all the way with it and not stop somewhere. But the idea is, I suffer. I suffered better than you, and so I won. I was reading Richard Rohr this week as I get his daily meditations, and most of the time I like them, but this week I kind of had a difference of opinion with him. He said that God is suffering love. God is a God that is suffering love. And it's like, no. He said it's epitomized in Jesus who had to suffer and die to redeem the world. Okay? And to me that's BS. Belief system. That BS. The word suffer actually originally meant in the early English just to allow, to let it happen, non-interference. Shakespeare has a line that says, the eagle suffers with the little birds to sing. That was the way of suffering being used. The eagle wasn't suffering. The eagle wasn't in pain because the little birds were singing. The eagle just allows them to. In the early translations of the Bible, it says Jesus suffered the little children to come unto him. Okay? He wasn't suffering. He just said, let them come. Don't interfere with them. Because the kingdom of heaven is like these. So that's the original meaning of suffering, is to just let go. Let move through what needs to move through and keep on going. Be in that love. So a true suffering God allows us our freedom to become what we will. A true suffering God just simply says, I allow this. I let this happen. I'm not going to interfere. I get people who say, how can God let this happen? And it's like, it's the same way that gravity lets this happen. It's just following its laws. It doesn't sit there and go, if you jump off the Empire State Building, if we took the Dalai Lama and I don't know, the leader of ISIS up to the top of the Empire State Building and shoved them both off, gravity doesn't sit there and go, well, I like you better, Dalai Lama, because you're a really good person and leader of ISIL, you're going to have a really bad experience here. It's just the same thing's going to happen to both of them, right? Gravity just works. It doesn't let or not let something happen. It just is happening. And God is that way. The law of God is that way. It's impersonal. So it lets us, if you will, become what we will. Ernest Holmes, in the very first chapter, the very first page of the Science of Mind textbook says that our purpose, the universe's only purpose for us, only agenda for us is freedom. Freedom. Because God itself is free and it is expressing through us, and so you and I are free to express. And that is our life, and that is our love, and that is our light, and that is our power, that is our peace, that is our beauty, and ultimately our freedom is our joy. Our freedom. And no one can take that away from us because it's a God quality. It's not legislated. It's not written up somewhere. No matter who and where we are, we live in that consciousness. So this week I invite you to play with this. Number one, as a spiritual practice, choose life. Truly, consciously choose life. Notice what happens for you if you wake up in the morning and say, I choose life. Try that for a week and just notice what happens in your life. You might notice, like I sometimes do, some resistance comes up. And I invite you to breathe that through, pray that through, meditate that through, identify it, where is it coming from, and heal that process. We have practitioners who are great for doing that sort of stuff, healing us out of the death urge and moving us into more of expression of life. But choose life. Have that be your affirmation that you start each day with. All of life is a beautiful process of God experiencing itself, even the stuff we don't like. It takes a bunch of manure to make the plants grow, right? Have you noticed? Okay? And so if you're standing in a field of manure, compost it into, plant something in it. Plant something in it that's good. So secondly, practice love. Practice love with yourself. Practice love with others. Throw away the list that you have of why you can't love yourself or another. Many of us have lists. Last week I talked about the exercise that Louise Hay invites people to do in her book, You Can Heal Your Life, of standing naked in front of a mirror, looking at yourself saying, I love you. Looking at all of yourself saying, I love you. And most people kind of go, ooh, And if we had a mirror that could show not only the external, but also the internal, my list of all the things I've done wrong, my list of all the ways I've failed, my list of, throw that list away, love yourself, because there's no reason not to. So practice that love. Tend to your own garden, tend to other people, to helping them experience more of life. And then finally, practice number 3, contemplate joy. Spend some time in the contemplation of joy. And just allow that to fill your life. As the reading at the very start says, if we gaze longingly at joy, it will make its home with us. And we shall enter its portals and be happy. Contemplate joy. And as you do, the power and the grace of Spirit flows through you and expands how much joy you can envision and how much joy you can experience. So will you join me in that spiritual practice this week? We're going to choose life, we're going to practice love, and we're going to contemplate joy. So that is what I invite you to do this week. I invite you to do it the week after that. I invite you to do that for the rest of your lives, actually, because this is my last talk, so I can't tell you what to do next week. But if you take that practice in for the rest of your lives, Jesus refers to his joy, this is from Science of Mind, Jesus refers to his joy on the eve of his greatest lesson to mankind. That joy is full and complete. That joy which no man can take away, the joy of a sense of completion. He was about to lay down his earthly life as the greatest object lesson ever taught. And what was that lesson? That love knows no bounds, and that the eternal goodness gives itself to all. God as man, in man, is man. God is expressing as you, in you, through you, and you and God are one. So let us move into prayer. Taking a breath with me, knowing that that infinite presence is all that there is, all that there is. It is this life. It is this love. It is this light. It is this power that creates, that says, let there be, and there is. It is this peace that arises because there is nothing standing in its way. It is the beauty that it creates because it is in alignment with love. And then there is the joy of experiencing its own creation. And you and I are one of that infinite presence, right here and right now. There is not, never has been, and never will be any separation between each of us and the Infinite One. Whether we remember it, whether we forget it, whether we know it or not, we are one of that infinite presence. One of that God, one of that Spirit, one of that life. And so I speak my word, knowing this truth, and that this is the truth of all of us, all people, all of life on this planet, all of life everywhere. That this is a life that ultimately results in joy. And that each of us experiences joy unbounded, greater than we have ever experienced before, and then greater than that. Beyond our imagination's joy, a joy that passes understanding. That is our nature, that is our purpose, that is why we are in form. That is why we have taken life in this particular form, is to experience God's joy, the joy that is God right here. Because this planet is as much God and as much spirit and as spiritual as anywhere else, any other form of existence, because there's God and only God. And so we allow ourselves to see the divine, fully see and experience it, and fully express it. And it moves through us not because we force it to, but because we are willing and we open to it. And so I am willing to have that expression for myself and for each person here. To have that divine be in beautiful, full expression in our lives. And so I'm grateful for the joy, for the good, for the love that is expressing through us, for the life energy that is expressing through us, here and now. For all that comes out of that, for all the good. And so I release this word, knowing it carries the power of spirit, and it is enacted upon by what we call the law, that process of growth, that process of manifesting this that we don't have to handle, that is handled automatically by this law. We simply are willing, we place this word into law, and we let it move into form, we let it be, we let it matter. And so it does, and so it is. Bless you.